We're up close and personal today with Senator Kevin Witkos, who represents the 8th District, who has served the longest serving senator in District 8, over 20 years in the General Assembly. Thank you for your service.
Thank you.
I don't think people realize just how much time, energy, and effort go into being a public servant.
No, and it's not just the time when you're in session from January to June or February to May. You're at meetings year-round. You've got requests from people who just need some help kind of navigating the red tape of government, so they call my Senate office.
And what's the best way that you communicate with your constituents? I always like to ask that, because sometimes people, they're shy, they want to do something or say something, they don't know the best way. What has worked for you when you look at your 20-year span?
I think email works the best to start. And depending on how complex the issue is, I'd rather meet face-to-face if people feel comfortable doing that. I always pick a public place. So I'm like a favorite customer of Panera Bread or Beans and Company down in Avon, because you need to explain it and understand. And I think you understand what the person's going through, the individual, if you can look at their body language as they're describing why they need your assistance.
And we'll get into body language in a minute, because you were a police officer for many, many years. So you understand how to talk to people about all kinds of different things. And not only that, you also were in the Canton Volunteer Fire Department and worked your way up to be chief. Yeah,
and I'm going to go back. I did announce my retirement from politics, and folks said, "What are you going to do when you retire?" I said, "Well, come June, I'm going to reapply for a position in the volunteer fire department because we need volunteers."
We don't want you to leave, though.
I'm not too far away.
Because when someone's in for that long, you hear both sides of the conversation on that. There should be term limits on people or this and that. But once you learn how to best navigate, work on both sides of the aisle, when you learn the issues, which sometimes carry over year after year, it's really important to have that experience behind you. Whereas if you're new coming in, it's a lot of learning that you have to do.
My friends are going to lose the historical perspective that I'm able to bring. But sometimes you need fresh blood and fresh ideas, and somebody else that maybe look at the issue through a different perspective.
I've got to ask you, what was the biggest reason that you said, okay, you know what, this is going to be my last year?
Well, I think it was a combination of things. I always wanted to grow professionally, and there's a lot of time commitment being a legislator, and I don't think the average person realizes that when you're an elected official, not only are you going to your committee meetings, your public hearings, you're voting on the bills in the chamber, which we've gone out 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 o'clock in the morning. Most people work another full-time job. So it was difficult for me to advance professionally. And I just felt after 20 years, it was a great run. And I thank everybody. It was an honor to serve in that capacity.
It's an honor to have you.
Yeah, and so I'm trying to move on. My kids were, when I first got elected, one was 5 and the other one was 3. Now they're in their mid-20s. So. And
you could still, as we know from talking to you and seeing what you've done in the community, you're very involved in your community, and you're still going to be. So let's just mention the communities. I had no idea how vast your territory was. So you go from Avon, Barkhamsted, Canton, Colebrook, way up in Granby, Heartland, Harwington, New Hartford, Norfolk, Simsbury, and the large city of Torrington.
Right.
And so that's quite a large district, and you have staff that I'm sure aids you in getting through.
One staff, Tim.
One staff person?
Tim, who's here with me today.
One staff person.
Tim does all the office work, all the communication, does all the press for me. We do have some researchers that assist us, but we're kind of like a one-person shop, if you will. And the district's very diverse, too. So we've got the rural communities of Norfolk and Heartland, to suburbia, Avon, Simsbury, Canton, to the city of Torrington.
Right. Right, very diverse.
So very varied.
Let's talk about that diversity a little bit. Let's talk about one of the issues that is near and dear to your heart, and mine being up in Goshen, is the bear population. So we're talking about Norfolk or even Granby, but then you hear about stories where bears are showing up in the suburbs, Canton and
Right.
Avon, West Hartford. What are we doing about the bear population in Connecticut?
Well, we're not even having a public hearing. It's unfortunate, and people say, Kevin, what can we do to address the bear population? The problem is that legislators from all over the state want to see bears because they don't have them in their neck of the woods, if you will. So if you're a legislator from Stonington or Weston or Greenwich, oh, they're nice. I'd like to see them more. I said, well, come up and visit any of my towns in the 8th District, and you'll see that there's an abundance of them, and actually too many of them. Mm-hmm. And the Connecticut Department of Environmental Protection would like to see some kind of wildlife management in place, because we don't have anything right now. But you need an act of the legislature, and the legislature is not there to pass anything yet. And, unfortunately, I think it's going to take somebody getting mauled or killed to have that take place. Just similar to the poor woman that had the ape, remember,
Yes,
a few years ago down in the southern part of the state? Mm-hmm. The day after she was mauled, we were in the Capitol, and they're passing a bill that outlawed people to have those as pets. So I think, unfortunately, that's what it's going to take to cause some kind of action here in Connecticut.
And it's not the bear's fault. This is a part of nature. I had a mom bear stop my car. I mean, she just stood in front of it. I wasn't going to go any further because her cubs were coming down from the tree. And yes, it's wonderful to see, but it's not so wonderful that when they're in your backyard or they're lifting up your garage door to get in. And we're seeing that I knew a woman in Canton who the bear went right into the house, right into the kitchen. And these bears can travel large distances in one day.
Right, 50 miles is where the experts say that a bear can travel in a single day. And it's not that do not feed the bear posted signs all over the place like Ranger Rick and Yogi Bear. They come in, they've broken into homes, they've broken into cars. They have a keen sense of smell. And so if they're hungry, especially now as they're coming out of hibernation, this is the time to, keep your bird feeders in.
Right.
And people do that. But, I knew they were out because my wife was driving down the street and she said the bears are out because every garbage can was overturned
they are
on the
out,
street. So
we've
they're
seen
out.
them. And we've
right.
seen one of my staff people lives in Plainville, and there was the bear in Plainville, and a large bear. And so wildlife management is very important, and it's nice to know that DEEP is interested in those conversations. And so if you have thoughts or feelings about the bear population, please send those comments into
your state representative and your state senator.
Okay, so that's very important, especially you folks who are in areas that maybe not seeing bears. And if you want to see bears, you can certainly come to the areas where in the northwest corner, but not so much anymore. Too. All right, let's talk about the trash recycling. I know July 1st, we're running into some kind of a deadline.
Right, so most of our communities in this area belong to what's called the MERA plant, Municipal Resource Recycling Authority. And you might go either Payne's or one of your local garbage trucks will pick up your garbage, and that's where they bring it. Or if you have a transfer station, when you drop off your items, it gets picked up and it gets transported there. As of July 1, that facility is closing. And unfortunately, I've been fighting this for a number of years, couldn't get any traction on this. The waste is going to be transported on the road to another state to be buried in a landfill. And I just think that is so wrong for us to do that. I worked tirelessly 2 years ago to pass a constitutional amendment to protect our open space, because I consider myself an environmentalist. I mean, if you don't love your land,
what do you have?
Right, exactly. And you have to make sure that you preserve it. And the solution is not to take Connecticut's garbage across, however many states, because you're creating pollution doing that as well, and then burying it in somebody's landfill.
Plus, isn't it expensive?
Very expensive. We're locked in now at what the rate the towns pay now for a number of years, but after that, it could skyrocket. So folks that may pay, $100. I'll give you an example. For me, in my hometown of Canton, I pay $150 a year for a dump pass. That could go up to $300 a year for a dump pass 2 years from now. So it's just unknown. And the other facilities we have in Connecticut, there's 5 or 6 of them, they are at capacity, so they can't take any more waste. So this is something that we've been pushing the Department of Environmental Protection to say shipping out of state is not an option. And two of the committees of the legislature are now looking into that, the Environment Committee and the Energy and Technology Committee. So I'm hopeful that they're developing a plan that'll force the state's hand to say, we need to invest, even if it's more additional money to keep this plant limping along until we have a long-term solution, because July 1's right around the corner.
Who's responsible for that long-term solution? Which part of government in Connecticut would be responsible for developing a solution for?
I think the state as a whole. I mean, it's some things, as a Republican, I always believe that we should have all the government we need, but only the amount of government that we need. And in this case, this is a statewide issue that I think the state's responsible for coming up with a plan on what do you do with your solid waste.
And I'll speak to for Northwest Connecticut. All the neighbors were complaining because we went from $400 a year for our collection to almost $500 a year for our collection. And people are saying, and with the gas prices, that's going to go up even higher. I mean, obviously, it passes on to the consumer. But to have to transport this trash out of the state is going to become even more costly.
Right, and I understand when people say, well, what's it going to cost? We heard estimates to take the plant that's now, which is located by Brainerd Airport, where it's in the city of Hartford. It would be about $330 million. And people are shocked by the price tag, but that'll give us another decade worth of use. So it's money well invested. I don't think the average person knows that we, meaning the taxpayers of Connecticut, spend about $400 million a year just on school construction. Every single year, $400 million.
Never knew that.
And how do you know when each town, I'm building a new school or I'm doing an addition?
Right.
How does that happen?
Right.
So, that's something that government should be investing in.
It should. And what, if July 1st is our deadline, is there a period of, is there something that we can do now as residents besides writing in?
Sure, I would look, go on CGA. .ct.gov, which is the Connecticut General Assembly website, and then look up the membership on the Energy and Technology Committee and the Environment Committee, and reach out to those elected officials and say, you need to do something, pass something out of your committee that doesn't allow that facility to close until we have a long-term plan in place.
Now, I looked at your website and before you came in, and I saw here that you had a link to a document called Your Voice Matters at the General Assembly. And I'd never seen that before, so I encourage people to go there. Go to Kevin Witkos's Senate page, and you'll see that link about how to reach your state legislator, how to email, what are the best phone numbers to call? Because I think a lot of times we're so busy in our own lives that we think, well, yes, the bears, or yes, the trash, or yes, some of these issues, but it's really important for legislators to hear from their constituents, because then they know that this is something that they really should pay attention to.
It's amazing if 20 people reach out to their legislator about an issue, that's a lot.
Really?
It's crazy, but legislators pay attention, especially where something that pops up. I know we sometimes are discussing 3,000 bills during the long session, so it runs the gamut. But if 25, 50 people are focusing on one issue, then my staff says to me, hey, you better look at this, and we got to either contact the people they want to hear about something or want more information. And your voice matters. I always say to folks, don't just sit there by the water cooler and complain.
Right.
Pick up the phone and send an email. Let your voice be heard so people know that this is an issue for you, either positive or negative, and let your elected officials represent you.
And there's no repercussion for that.
There's zero.
So don't be shy. It's important for all of us to have the state that we want to live in. We elect folks to represent us, but it's our job to also voice our concerns, and it's very easy to do so. Even if you don't have access to the computer, there are phone numbers that you can call and make a quick phone call and leave a message. So a little bit about your background, 28 years in law enforcement. Did you like that?
I did. That was probably one of the best careers that I've had. I met folks, delivered 2 babies over the course of my career. So,
wow.
It's a very, very unique job. And unfortunately, the police are under siege in Connecticut because of the police accountability bill. I voted against it. I think it's bad. It was bad public policy.
Did that involve insurance too?
It did. And one of the things, and I'll talk about the insurance, but one of the things that unfortunately, one bad apple spoiled the entire bunch. So something happened where they got to a legislator's ear, and now there's cast a wide net over everybody. And now you're hearing from police departments, we can't hire qualified individuals.
It was in the paper in Torrington.
Because nobody wants to become a cop anymore, because the thought of, you know, an accusation, you could lose your house, your life savings, on and on and on. So people don't want that liability.
It was in the Waterbury Republican that they cannot get qualified people. And what's that going to do to us? That's going to be a big problem.
Yeah, it's going to make it worse. So
Did that pass?
Yeah, it passed 2 years ago. We've been trying to you know, rescind it if we could, but I don't think that's going to happen given the current makeup of the General Assembly. But we'll keep chipping away at it. And one of the things that has been an issue in the Valley are juveniles stealing cars, joyride. So we've got some initiatives and some bills this year that hopefully will make some difference and some impact. And one of those is, you know, you get arrested or you get a referral if you're a juvenile. You may not go to court for another 3 weeks or a month away. So this says it's going to be treated almost like domestic violence, where you're going the very next day. So it gets you in there, and then oftentimes there's other issues behind the individual act, whether that's, you know, a support group at home, or you can look at the school's, the child's tardiness at school, absenteeism rate, and kind of figure out, is there a substance abuse issue or an abuse issue, and really get in there and address some of the underlying problems.
Can the police enforcement that's at the high schools or at the schools, the resource officers where the kids really get to know them and talk to them, are they helpful in this area?
If they're still there, a lot of towns pulled them out because of the police accountability bill.
I didn't know that. That's terrible.
It's very, very sad. I mean, I was
they were so important.
An officer friendly back in the day, you know, when the program first started, and you really got to know the kids and the students, you know, on a one-on-one basis, and you knew who was having problems at home, and sometimes you used a little bit of discretion, you know, just gave a little tongue lashing, and that's all it needed. It didn't need, you know, hauling them down to the police department or something along those lines.
And even kids who are in situations where they're really not eating, they're really not, they may not even be able to go home at night in some cases, and they're just kind of walking around, and they don't want to tell anybody. And that school resource officer can really get to know and say, hey, what's going on, you know, and behind the scenes, kind of get that kid taken care of in an easy way. And are we seeing these thefts in the Valley? You said the Valley.
Yeah.
You think big cities.
Avon was one of the biggest towns that was suspect or victim of juvenile car thefts. So same as Farmington.
I interviewed the chief of police in Canton, and you guys have a great program called the Sunshine Program, where the elderly are called. If you're on a call list and you're living alone, and maybe you're infirmed and aren't getting out that much, they call every morning. Good morning, just making sure everything's okay. I mean, what a resource, and they're the only town that I know that's doing that. So shout out to Canton.
Yeah, people want human interaction. We have some folks that I'll say they're the constant callers that my assistant Tim will pick up, and they'll just have them on the phone for 35, 40 minutes, just to talk, because they want to connect with somebody. And they feel comfortable. It's kind of been an ongoing relationship with one woman individual. Prior to Tim working for my office, the person previous to him, they had that conversation. So it was like, I have somebody else coming into the office now. Well, rekindled that relationship, and it happens every couple of months. They just call in just to chat.
Yeah, we have that too at Nutmeg, and we welcome that. We love
absolutely.
Those folks, because we matter to them and they matter to us. Let's talk about higher education. The college enrollment and retention, and you said something to me before we started that I had never heard of, which was the silver
tsunami. We have an aging population here in the state of Connecticut, predominantly over 50, and so if we don't have, you can see it in the demographics for enrollment in kindergarten all the way up through the elementary grades. It's diminished. The class size is going down. So we've got to be able to create a environment here in Connecticut, good on taxes. We have a great workforce, a good education. So we want to make sure that our kids stay here when they graduate from college, or the kids that come to Connecticut, whether it's UConn or Yale or one of our CSUs or any of our other private institutions, they fall in love in Connecticut. There's jobs for them, and they can start a family here in Connecticut.
And affordable housing.
And affordable housing. We had two issues that we talked about, and I was kind of surprised on the higher education: food insecurity and homelessness for college students. And I didn't think that honestly, I didn't think that was an issue. But I heard of a story of a student that was waiting to enroll in school and slept in their car for a month before they could get the dorm room situation squared away. And that's horrific that something like that would happen, that a student actually would come and talk about that. Where were their parents? I want to say, how are you snowballed to think that your child's safe and secure, away at college and they're living in their car for a month? So there's a lot of things in play here, but we've got eyes on everything. So we're trying to figure out, but sometimes it's self-responsibility, parental responsibility, but the school has to make sure that there's safety nets to make sure that nobody falls through the cracks.
In Connecticut, we have to make sure that we're providing, that we have a state where people can afford to live, want to live. We have such a beautiful state with so many things to offer. And so they stay here, raise families here, and continue to develop the community. Now, what about the community college consolidation?
That's a hot topic at the Capitol right now. It's moving forward. What we're trying to do is combine all of our community colleges. There's 17 of them, plus our online college, into one Connecticut community college. And there's a process to go through that. We have an accrediting agency that has given initial approval, but there's a lot of legislators that don't like it. They're getting outside influence on their decision. And so there's a bill that is making its way. I did not support it out of committee, but it says that if we move forward in consolidating the community colleges, the legislature has the final say in that. And I don't think, unless you're a professor, you're not an expert to make that decision. I mean, we hire the experts to do that work. We're the policymakers, and I don't think that the name of the program is Students First. So we want the students to succeed. We're trying to provide the best educational opportunities for these students. So let's move forward and make sure that happens.
And then we also have, you're also sit on the General Law Committee, and Senator Witkos is ranking members on a lot of these committees, which require him to be there throughout the whole process. But on the General Law Committee, consumer data privacy, that's another hot topic.
It's a very controversial topic. There's only one other state that has a state statute that has to deal with consumer privacy. And what that is, you may hear on the news sometimes somebody says, oh, there was a data breach, MasterCard. There was a leak, somebody potentially would have gotten your data. We'll provide free credit reporting, monitoring for you for a year or something like that. This goes well beyond that. And I'll give for an example. So if a restaurant hires somebody to manage their website, and you've all been to restaurants before where you get there, and especially during COVID, there's a little QR code. You take your phone to take a picture and scan it, and it brings up the menu at the restaurant. Well, that counts as a click. So if there's a certain number of clicks on your website, then that means you're part of this group where if there's something that happens, you're responsible for it. And you can be gone after by the Attorney General's office. And, if you're the restaurant owner, you're not managing your website. You paid somebody to do that, so you don't actually have the data of who did it, and I wouldn't even know how you did it. So I don't know. It's been around for 3 or 4 years, and there's a big push to get it through this year, but extremely controversial. And in a short session, I don't know if that will happen, because the calendar, or I should say the clock, becomes the friend of the minority party at that point, because we are required, according to the state constitution, to adjourn at midnight on May 5th.
And when we were waiting for you to come in, Beverly, my assistant, said, well, we're going to get a mid-session update. I said, mid-session? It's March. Mid-session update. And then you think about it. And so talk to us about what a short session is so folks understand, because it's every other year is a short session. Right.
So we have, you're elected for a 2-year term. The first year that you're elected is the year that you create a biennial budget. So it's a 2-year budget. And then anybody can introduce whatever they want. So we've had things from naming the state cookie to be this, and moving Halloween to the last Saturday in October. I mean, whatever crazy ideas you want. I mean, you're allowed to. And then there's about 4,000 bills that are introduced, and about 800 become law out of that 4,000. The short session, which runs the year that we're in now, it's always an election year as a short session. It goes from February to May, and you're only supposed to do budget adjustments, because things change, so you might have to adjust your budget over the year. Or a committee can bring ideas, and so no individual legislators can bring them, but the committee can. And so there's probably a couple thousand bills out there now that the committees have most of them have finished their public hearings. Now they're trying to figure out what can we do to get it across the finish line, because in Connecticut you have to go through both chambers and before it gets to the governor's desk for a signature. So there's a time constraint as well.
All right, and how has the COVID continuation of COVID controls, so to speak, on the LOB, how has that impacted you? Are you in the legislative office building? Can general public go in there? Are lobbyists in there? How is that looking right now?
Well, you would think that we would have the ability, because we're a republic, that government for the people, by the people, that you could go in there to your elected officials to talk to them. However, you can on the first floor and the second floor of the Capitol building. The first floor is basically where the Secretary of State's office is and all the different displays. The second floor is where the House of Representatives is located and the governor's office. And the third floor is where the Senate is located and the lieutenant governor's office. One individual, the Senate President Pro Tem, has declared that the third floor is off limits to anybody that is in the public. And you must wear a mask when you're on the third floor. Whereas if you're on the first or second floor, masks are optional if you want to wear one, and the public can go there, including the lobbyists who have great information. They get a bad rap, lobbyists do, but because they represent their clients and they educate legislators, because there's so many different things. They can provide nuances, or if you have questions, they'll run back to their client and say, this is the answer to that. And they have an ethical standard that they must maintain as well. So I think people look at the movies and things that might have happened in Washington, D.C. We have a lot of ethical conditions and things in place now, so people don't run afoul.
Very strong ones. We have a lobbyist ourselves for an issue, and the Ethics Commission, I have to file certain reports to what we're doing, and there's really good checks and balances. We're out of time already. It's been so great to have you here. There's so many more things that we could talk about, but I want to thank you for your service. You're not done. You have still a ways to go, and I'm sure you'll be very involved in our communities, but anytime you want to come back, we're happy to have you. So for all of us at Nutmeg TV, until the next edition of Up Close and Personal, we'll see you next time.